So last week we talked in general terms about show, don't tell. And I said because it was such a big topic that I would be spending several videos talking about it. And towards the end of that video, I ad-libbed what those subsequent videos would be about. Do I regret just making up what the next 5 weeks worth of videos would be about on the spot with very little consideration or deliberation? Not really. Do I regret keeping that clip in the finished video? A little bit. Today, according to my off-the-cuff ramblings last week, we are going to be talking about writing descriptions and how that relates to the whole show v tell thing. Both descriptions related to describing the setting or the physical environment around the characters, and descriptions related to describing the characters themselves. This is arguably the most prominent area where show versus tell comes into play. As I talked about last week, showing things to the reader involves relating information through sensory means. This is the most vivid and least abstract way to get this information across, compared to telling, which is kind of vague and very, very abstract. While you can tell the reader about the setting or what the characters look like through telling, it's much more effective to relate this information through showing. But, and there's always a but, remember that when you're describing characters, you need to be careful as it's easy to go overboard when writing descriptions. Like most other things in writing, descriptions are a balance between providing enough detail to set the scene for the reader, but not so much detail that it becomes a problem. This is where knowing when to show and when to tell becomes really important. So with that, here are some tips on writing descriptions that will hopefully relate back enough to show v tell to justify this video being part of the series. Tip number 1, engage all 5 senses. As a writer, it's easy to fall back on only describing the sights of a location, what the characters are seeing around them, or only describing how a character looks. While the majority of the information you convey is probably going to be done through sight, don't forget about the other 4 senses as well. The sounds, the smells, the textures, the tastes. Okay, taste is one that you can usually ignore, although if it does make sense, don't hesitate to use it. It's generally not a great idea to have your characters going around and tasting the setting, or tasting the other characters. I mean, I suppose there's certain kinds of books that, this is not going in the direction I wanted it to go. Basically, using sensory information, including but not limited to sight, is going to help ground the reader in the scene. In real life, people rely on sensory information to tell them about their environment. If you want to paint a vivid, lifelike picture in your reader's mind, then you need to do the same thing. So next time you're writing a description of a setting, think about the sounds the character is hearing, the smells they're smelling, and the feelings they're feeling. Which brings us nicely to tip number 2. Tip number 2, show the description through emotional reactions, and bonus tip, tailor those emotional reactions to the viewpoint character that's describing them. People don't just observe the sights and sounds and smells around them. They also react to them in some way. This emotional reaction not only, again, helps to ground the reader in the scene, but it also allows you to get across setting information with a bit less telling by literally showing the effect that the setting is having on the characters, both emotionally and physically. Different people can also have different reactions to the same environment or character. Showing these different reactions is a great way to get some free characterization along with describing the setting. These reactions are affected by so many things about the character, from their backstory to their level of education to where they were brought up, whether they go around tasting things around them for no reason, all kinds of things. A naive and idealistic character is going to react differently to a setting than a jaded, more worldly character will. They're going to notice different things, have different opinions, and different feelings about the environment around them. If you can get this information across through the way you describe the setting in the viewpoint of each character, then you're not only developing the character, but also describing the setting in a much more compelling way. Just be sure not to do too much of this. Tip number 3, don't overdo the descriptions. Like a lot of things in writing and creative pursuits in general, and I guess life in general, writing descriptions is a balance between doing not enough and doing too much. It's very easy to get carried away and spend too much time describing the setting or the characters. This type of over-description is going to bore the reader and distract them from the plot of the story. This is where, as we talked about last time, finding a balance between telling and showing is really important. As with other parts of prose, you can convey descriptive information much quicker and in fewer words through telling than showing. Knowing when to do that versus spending more words showing is what's important. Finding out if you're describing too much or too little is where this gets complicated. There are no hard and fast rules about how much is too much. And if you're really, really good at writing descriptions, or your intended reader really likes reading descriptions, then spending too much time on description can be a feature rather than a bug. Unless you're describing a literal bug, I suppose, in which case it would be a bug. A few things I can recommend here besides just getting some general feedback and seeing what your readers think about how much description you're doing. First, make sure your description isn't causing too long of a break in the action. If you're stopping in the middle of a car chase to describe the Golden Gate Bridge in intricate detail, or to spend a page and a half describing a character you just introduced, then you're likely going to run into pacing problems. The description is going to become a distraction from what the reader is actually interested in, and it's going to reduce the tension that you've built up in that scene. One other way around this is to provide descriptive details only as they become relevant. For example, when you introduce a new character, you don't need to stop the story completely in order to describe every aspect of their appearance. Instead, try doling out this information as the action and flow of the story make it relevant, or as your viewpoint character notices these things. This is why whenever I introduce a new character, I make sure they're wearing a mask. That way I don't have to stop the story dead to describe what they look like until they take off the mask at a point that is narratively convenient. I have to jump through a lot of hoops to make sure that characters are always wearing a mask when they get introduced, but that's a separate problem. Just like this poorly written transition to the conclusion is a separate problem. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video and found the advice in it useful. If you want to see more stuff like this, you can check out all my other writing advice videos and subscribe to my channel. I post new videos every Wednesday. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.